You know, pregnancy is just this time of incredible transformation, and maybe nowhere is that more visible than on your skin. For some, it brings that legendary radiant glow, but for others, it can mean a whole bunch of confusing new spots, rashes, and just general discomfort. So, in this explainer, we're going to break down the entire spectrum of skin changes you might run into, from the ones people celebrate to the ones that are a little more concerning. All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the science behind that famous pregnancy glow. Then we'll get into the three core reasons behind all the skin changes, look at the most common ones you might see, and then dive deep into rashes that only pop up during pregnancy. And we'll wrap up with the single most important takeaway for looking after your skin during this wild ride. So let's kick things off with the one everybody talks about, that pregnancy glow. Is it just something people say to be nice when you're feeling a bit flushed, or is there some real biology going on? Well, let me tell you, it is 100% real. So yeah, the glow, it's not a myth at all. It's basically this perfect storm of biology. First up, your blood volume can shoot up by almost 50%. That massive boost in circulation is what gives you that natural rosy look. Then you've got hormones surging, which kicks your oil glands into high gear, creating that dewy, luminous sheen. And on top of all that, your body is turning over skin cells faster, revealing brighter, plumper skin. It's a pretty amazing combination. But that beautiful glow is really just one piece of the puzzle. The very same things that create it are also responsible for pretty much every other skin change during pregnancy. So what's really going on under the hood?
Everything that happens to your skin during pregnancy, you can pretty much trace it back to these three powerful physiological shifts. We've touched on the hormones and the extra blood volume. That's the glow, but it's also why you might see spider veins. But this third one, the immune system shift, okay, this is the real game changer. It's the key to understanding why certain rashes and conditions suddenly flare up. Okay, so this is the really wild part. To keep from rejecting the fetus, your body's immune system has to change its whole strategy. It basically flips a switch, dialing down its usual infection-fighting response, which is called Th1, and dialing up an allergy-prone response known as Th2. And the result of this is fascinating. Conditions like psoriasis, which are driven by that Th1 system, might actually get better, while something like eczema, a Th2 condition, can suddenly get way worse.
Okay, so now that we kind of know the why, let's talk about the what. We'll look at some of the most common and thankfully harmless skin changes that so many people experience. First up is melasma, which you might have heard called the mask of pregnancy. Those same hormones we've been talking about can tell your body to produce way more melanin. That's the stuff that gives skin its color. This can lead to these brownish patches on your cheeks, nose, and forehead. And here's the kicker: sun exposure totally makes it worse. So, sunscreen, it becomes your absolute best friend if you're trying to manage this. And then, of course, you've got the other classics, and they're all tied to these same big changes. That same spike in melanin can cause the linea nigra, that dark line down your abdomen. The skin stretching to make room for the baby can lead to stretch marks. Hormones can bring on a new wave of acne, and all that extra blood can cause little spider veins. Look, they might not be the most welcome changes, but the thing to remember is that all of this is a totally normal part of the process. But what happens when it's more than just a new spot or a dark line? Well, there's a whole group of inflammatory skin conditions that happen only during pregnancy or right after. This is where we get into something called the pregnancy dermatoses. So the most common one by a long shot is called atopic eruption of pregnancy, or AEP. It makes up about half of all cases. Remember that immune system shift to the more allergy-prone Th2 state? Well, this is a direct result of that. It's basically eczema flaring up or even appearing for the very first time. And while it can be super itchy and uncomfortable, here's the most important part, the real bottom line. There is no risk to the baby. All right, next up, we have one with a pretty unforgettable acronym, PUPP. It stands for polymorphic eruption of pregnancy. This one is an intensely itchy rash. Think red bumps and hives that usually shows up late in a first pregnancy. And again, while it can make you absolutely miserable with the itching, the great news is that PUPP is not harmful to the baby. So how common is it? Well, PUPPF affects about 1 in every 200 pregnancies. So it's not super rare, but it's not something everyone gets either. And it seems to be more common if it's your first baby, if you're carrying multiples, or if you've gained a significant amount of weight. And if you look here, you can see what we're talking about. A classic sign of PUPS is that the itchy red bumps often get their start right inside the stretch marks on the abdomen.
and then they can spread from there. And here's a little clue doctors look for. See how the rash kind of avoids the area right around the belly button? That's actually a classic sign. Okay, I want to shift gears here for a second, and this is really important. While most of the rashes you might see during pregnancy are harmless, there are a couple of very rare conditions that are more serious and absolutely require immediate medical attention. This is pustular psoriasis of pregnancy, or PPP. Now, this is extremely rare, but it's so important that we talk about it. It shows up as these rings of pus-filled bumps and often comes with other symptoms like fever, nausea, and just feeling really sick. And this is the big difference. Unlike everything else we've discussed, this one can pose risks, like placental insufficiency, which can impact the baby's growth and health. This chart really lays it all out, nice and clear. You've got AEP, the most common one. It usually starts earlier in pregnancy and has zero risk to the baby. Then there's PUPP, which starts later, is super itchy, but again, no risk to the baby. And then you have PPP, the rare one. It also starts later, but the key differences are the pustules and feeling sick. And this is the one that carries a possible risk to the fetus. And this is exactly why getting a proper diagnosis from a doctor is so critical. All right, so we've covered a ton of ground here, everything from a beautiful glow to some really uncomfortable rashes. So what's the single most important thing to take away from all of this? The first thing to remember is just take a breath. The vast majority of these skin changes, they're a totally normal and temporary part of this whole incredible physiological journey. From melasma to stretch marks to even most of the rashes, they usually clear up after you deliver, as your body gets back to its old self. But and this is the crucial point. You just can't be your own dermatologist here. As this quote from the medical research makes crystal clear, because some of those rare conditions do carry risks, getting a quick and accurate diagnosis isn't just about feeling better. It's about making sure both you and your baby stay healthy and safe. So here it is, the ultimate tip. Your body is doing something absolutely remarkable. So please, don't try to Google your way through a weird rash, or just brush it off because you think it's normal. The single best thing you can do is talk to your doctor or dermatologist about any skin changes you notice, no matter how small they seem. They're your partner in this, and they're the only ones who can help you navigate it safely. I mean, it really makes you think, doesn't it? The skin is just the billboard for all the mind-blowing changes happening inside. Which leaves us with a final question to ponder. How else does the body's incredible, and sometimes just plain strange adaptability, show up during pregnancy?